On January 4th, 2022, millions of devices sitting in American desk drawers quietly turned into dead plastic. Research in Motion officially severed the original BlackBerry infrastructure, terminating the network that once carried the secure communications of Wall Street and the Pentagon. 19 years earlier, during the Northeast blackout of 2003, the paradox of this shutdown would have seemed impossible. When the power grid failed and cellular networks collapsed across New York, BlackBerry was the only system that kept working. Now the final server shutdown meant those physical keyboards could no longer send a single email. The iconic red notification light would never blink again. The device engineered for disaster survival ended up entirely obsolete. Not because it broke, but because the ecosystem around it shifted. But the real story of BlackBerry is not only the story of a severed network. It is the story of how America bought the future in a tactile plastic keyboard, and what happened when the future moved to a sheet of glass. Every week, we tell the stories of American devices, platforms, software, stores, and screens that once taught the country what the future felt like, and what happened when the market moved on. Subscribe if that history matters to you. The story of BlackBerry begins not with nostalgia, but with a specific place in an American corporate office in 1999. In the late 1990s, the American corporate workday was defined by a strict physical boundary. To do business, an employee had to be anchored to a desk. The personal computer, a machine designed for one person to use directly, usually fixed to a workstation, was the heavy center of gravity in every office cubicle from Midtown Manhattan to downtown Chicago. Communication relied on landline telephones, screeching fax machines, and dial-up modems, devices that let computers send data over analog phone lines. Email was rapidly becoming the nervous system of American commerce, but it was still a destination. You did not carry your inbox, you visited it. When an executive left the office for an airport, a client meeting, or a train commute, they went completely dark. Corporate IT departments, the internal teams responsible for managing a company's hardware, security, and network infrastructure, accepted this blackout period as an unavoidable technological reality. To stay connected on the road, business travelers carried heavy laptops and padded briefcases, searching hotel rooms and airport lounges for active phone jacks just to dial back into corporate servers, the centralized computers that housed company emails. It was a slow, expensive, and frustrating ritual. The solution to this American workflow problem did not come from Silicon Valley, and it did not start as a mobile phone. It arrived in 1999 as a small, odd-looking plastic rectangle called the BlackBerry 850. Created by a Canadian engineering company named Research in Motion, the 850 was not designed for the average consumer browsing the shelves of a mall electronics store. It was launched squarely at the American enterprise market. Physically, it looked like a standard two-way pager, a simple belt-clip device historically used by doctors and field technicians to receive short numeric messages. But the 850 featured a tiny, highly tactile QWERTY keyboard and a monochromatic screen that could display 6 to 8 lines of text. The hardware was only half of the equation. The real power of the 850 was the invisible software infrastructure sitting behind it. Research in Motion introduced a concept to the American corporate market called push email. Before this, users had to manually connect their devices and request their mail server to pull down new messages. It was an active, intentional chore. Push technology changed the fundamental physics of digital communication. The server automatically and securely routed incoming corporate emails directly to the wireless device the exact second they arrived. There was no dialing in. There was no refreshing. The message simply appeared. Suddenly, the inbox was no longer trapped inside a beige tower on an office desk. It was attached to the belt of a Wall Street trader, buzzing silently in the middle of a board meeting. It was in the hands of a lawyer riding a commuter train, reading client updates in real time, The physical boundary of the American office had just been erased. By 2002, the American executive faced a growing physical problem. Their belt was becoming crowded. They carried a traditional cell phone for voice calls and a BlackBerry pager for data. Research in Motion recognized that these two distinct workflows needed to merge into a single piece of hardware. They released the BlackBerry 5810, the first model to integrate voice capabilities, though it awkwardly required a wired headset to make a phone call. But in 2003, they perfected the formula with the BlackBerry 6210, a unified device with an integrated phone, a microphone, and a screen that could display the full text of a corporate email. The true magic of the 6210 was not its monochrome display, which remained small and strictly utilitarian. The breakthrough was the physical keyboard, a set of tiny, hard plastic keys built directly into the lower half of the device. RIM's engineers did not simply shrink a desktop computer keyboard. They engineered the keys with a specific ergonomic angle, sloping them inward toward the center. This microscopic design choice birthed a completely new American physical habit: thumb typing. In a busy American airport terminal like Chicago O'Hare or Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson, a traveling executive could grip the heavy plastic device with both hands and type out complex, multi-paragraph corporate responses using only their thumbs. It was fast, tactile, and completely blind typable. Because the keys provided a distinct physical click, muscle memory took over entirely. A user could stare at a printed spreadsheet on an airplane tray table and type a detailed financial directive without ever looking down at their hands. But the secret to BlackBerry's total conquest of the American office was not the keyboard. It was the fact that the actual user was not the customer. During this era, normal Americans did not walk into a mall, electronics store, or a carrier store, a retail shop run by a mobile network operator like AT&T, Verizon, or Nextel, to browse for a BlackBerry. The device was purchased in bulk by American corporate IT departments. To these network administrators, the BlackBerry was an absolute dream of control. RIM offered a massive piece of back-end software called the BlackBerry Enterprise Server, or BES. BES acted as a secure middleman, sitting safely behind a company's corporate firewall, the digital security system designed to block unauthorized access to a private network. When an email arrived at the corporate server, BES encrypted it, compressed it, and pushed it out to the mobile network instantly. Encryption, the mathematical process of scrambling data so that only authorized parties can read it, was handled end-to-end. Not even Research in Motion could read the emails passing through their own data centers. To an IT director at a Wall Street investment bank, a Washington, D.C. law firm, or the Pentagon, this was the only metric that mattered. They did not care if the device had a bright color screen, entertaining games, or a digital camera. In fact, many government agencies strictly demanded devices without cameras to prevent corporate espionage. They cared entirely about security, stability, and management. If a mid-level manager left their BlackBerry in the back of a New York taxi, the IT department could remotely wipe its memory, erasing every sensitive corporate file before the cab reached the next block. The American corporate user did not choose the BlackBerry. It was issued to them on their first day of work, alongside a keycard and a security badge. It was a mandatory tool of the trade. And once it was in their hands, the user became trapped by a tiny, brilliant piece of hardware engineering, the blinking red LED notification light. Positioned at the top right of the device, this small bulb flashed a piercing, hypnotic red every time a new message arrived. Before the BlackBerry, checking corporate email required sitting down at a desktop computer, opening a program, and actively looking for work. The red LED inverted this entire relationship. It commanded attention from across the room. In an American bedroom at 11 p.m., That blinking red light shining from a nightstand was a powerful Pavlovian trigger. It told the user that a boss, a client, or a colleague was waiting for an answer. You did not have to unlock the screen to know you were needed. The device signaled you in the dark. It effectively destroyed the boundary between the American office and the American home. You were never truly off the clock. The device became an extension of the worker's nervous system, creating a continuous cycle of anxiety and relief with every flashing light and every tactile click. By the mid-2000s, the combination of hardware precision, military-grade security, and carrier distribution had created an impenetrable enterprise fortress. The IT department had chosen the winner, and for a few fleeting years, the rest of the country agreed. By 2005, the BlackBerry had achieved something entirely unprecedented in American technology. It had escaped the IT department. The device that was engineered as a strict, secure tool for corporate data had accidentally become the ultimate American status symbol. The cultural shift started at the very top of the American power structure. In the hallways of Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., politicians paced the marble floors, heads bowed, furiously thumb-typing on their BlackBerry 723Os. On Wall Street, trading floors were packed with brokers who relied on the physical click of the keyboard to execute rapid-fire decisions before the market closed. But the tipping point occurred when the device crossed over into Hollywood and American pop culture. Paparazzi photographs routinely captured celebrities, athletes, and musicians stepping out of black SUVs in Los Angeles and New York, not waving to the cameras, but staring down at the glowing screens of their BlackBerry Pearls or Curves. Suddenly, normal American consumers wanted one. They did not care about military-grade encryption or the BlackBerry Enterprise server. They saw the device as a velvet rope. Holding a BlackBerry meant you were important. It meant people needed to reach you. The American carrier stores, retail shops operated by AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint, adapted to this massive wave of consumer demand. They began selling BlackBerry devices directly to everyday users, bypassing the corporate IT firewall entirely. The word crackberry entered the American lexicon, a testament to the severe psychological grip the device held over its users. It was named the Word of the Year by Webster's New World College Dictionary in 2006. In the American corporate and social hierarchy, where power was once measured by the size of a corner office or the exclusivity of a club, the right device did not merely send email. It decided who was important enough to be reached at midnight, who was trusted with the inner circle's secrets, and who felt that the future of communication belonged to them. In a Manhattan restaurant, placing a BlackBerry on the white tablecloth next to a wine glass was a calculated social signal. In college dorm rooms across the country, students who previously relied on desktop computers for instant messaging began craving the constant, pocket-sized connection that the BlackBerry promised. The physical keyboard was no longer just a tool for writing corporate memos. It was the fastest way to navigate a rapidly accelerating digital social life. Research in Motion had accidentally built a bridge between the rigid American office and the chaotic American consumer market. When a customer walked into a Best Buy or a mall kiosk, the BlackBerry section was distinct. It was not positioned next to the cheap flip phones or the basic digital cameras. It was marketed as a premium tier of existence. The devices themselves evolved from the bulky, blue plastic models to the sleek, consumer-friendly BlackBerry Pearl. The Pearl introduced the trackball, a tiny, glowing, physical sphere set just above the keyboard that allowed users to scroll through menus with unprecedented speed. The physical sensation of rolling the trackball and feeling the microscopic clicks under the thumb became a defining tactile memory for a generation of Americans. By 2008, Research in Motion was a towering empire. Its valuation skyrocketed, and it commanded nearly half of the entire American smartphone market. The company was shipping tens of millions of devices, flooding carrier shelves and enterprise purchasing catalogs. Every major American telecom network fought fiercely to offer the best BlackBerry data plans. It was an ecosystem of hardware perfection where battery life was measured in days, not hours, and the device rarely, if ever, crashed. But the hardware and the cultural prestige were only the visible layers of the empire. The true power of the BlackBerry, the invisible gravity that locked millions of American teenagers, professionals, and celebrities into the ecosystem, was a piece of software that created the most exclusive digital club in the world. The hardware and the cultural prestige were only the visible layers of the empire. The true power of the BlackBerry, the invisible gravity that locked millions of American teenagers, professionals, and celebrities into the ecosystem, was a piece of software that created the most exclusive digital club in the world. It was called BlackBerry Messenger, or BBM. BBM was an instant messaging application built directly into the operating system. Instead of sending standard SMS text messages over open cellular networks, which American carriers frequently charged for by the message, BBM routed text, photos, and voice notes through Research in Motion's own highly compressed encrypted servers. It was incredibly fast, completely secure, and essentially free to use for anyone paying for a BlackBerry data plan. But the brilliance of BBM was not just its speed, it was its architecture of exclusivity. To add a contact on BBM, an American user did not ask for a standard phone number. They asked for a PIN, a unique 8-character alphanumeric code hard-coded into the physical device itself. Trading PINs became a vital cultural ritual. In a Manhattan bar, handing someone a business card with a BlackBerry, PIN printed on it signaled a level of professional intimacy that a standard phone number did not. On college campuses and in high school cafeterias, the PIN created a rigid digital class divide. You either possessed the hardware to enter the walled garden of BBM, or you were forced to communicate through standard, unreliable green text messages. BBM also introduced a brutal new psychological mechanic to American digital life: the read receipt. When a user sent a message, a tiny D appeared next to it when it was delivered to the recipient's device. When the message was opened, the letter instantly flipped to an R for read. This tiny interface detail rewired human expectations. It removed the excuse of missing a message. It demanded an immediate response, accelerating the pace of American communication and deepening the user's addiction to the glowing screen. By 2009, the scale of the BlackBerry empire was staggering. Research in Motion controlled over 40% of the entire American smartphone market. The company was shipping roughly 50 million devices globally. The BlackBerry Enterprise Server was deeply entrenched in the IT infrastructure of nearly every Fortune 500 company and major United States government agency. To walk through an American airport terminal like JFK or Dallas/Fort Worth during this era was to witness a physical monoculture. Entire rows of seating were filled with business travelers in suits, heads bowed, gripping plastic devices with both hands. The collective sound of the American business world waiting for a flight was the rapid, overlapping, insect-like click of thousands of thumbs hitting plastic keys. In an American culture increasingly obsessed with instant communication, the BlackBerry did not merely run software. It decided who belonged to the inner circle, who could bypass the cost and delay of standard networks, and who held the power to command an entire corporation from a small plastic rectangle. The device was no longer just an enterprise tool. It was the central nervous system of American productivity. How did an empire protected by military-grade encryption and the loyalty of millions of BBM users collapse? It wasn't destroyed from the outside. It was stripped of its power in the American carrier store. The decline of the BlackBerry empire did not begin with a sudden bankruptcy, a massive server failure, or a dramatic press conference. Following the rule of the escalation staircase, the collapse started with a minor dissonance, a small, almost invisible crack inside the very American corporate offices that Research in Motion thought it owned completely. In late 2007, a new, subtle friction appeared at the IT help desks of almost every major American company, from Midtown Manhattan advertising agencies to Chicago logistics firms. At the time, the illusion of BlackBerry's invincibility was absolute. The company's market share was still actively growing. Their profits were at record highs, but the foundation of their power was based on Force 2 of the American tech market: distribution and platform access. RIM operated under the assumption that the corporate network administrator was the ultimate decision maker. As long as the IT department mandated the BlackBerry for its military-grade encryption and remote wipe capabilities, the American worker had no choice but to use it. When Apple launched the iPhone in June 2007, the initial reaction from both RM executives and American IT directors was identical: absolute dismissal. To a network administrator, the iPhone was a security nightmare. It had a terrible battery that barely survived a single workday without needing a charge. It lacked the proprietary, highly compressed data routing that made the BlackBerry Enterprise server so efficient. Most importantly, it had no physical keyboard. To the Canadian engineers who built the BlackBerry, typing on a flat, unyielding pane of glass was an ergonomic joke. They believed the American business traveler, conditioned by years of tactile muscle memory, would never abandon the speed and precision of the thumb-typing habit for a smudge-covered screen. They viewed the iPhone not as a serious corporate tool, but as a fragile consumer toy, a device for watching YouTube, not for managing a global supply chain. But RIM severely misunderstood who was about to seize power. They believed their walled garden was protected by the IT department. Apple knew the real power lay with the end user. And the American end user was growing incredibly tired of the physical burden of the early 2000s. This was the era of the two-device commute. An American executive would walk through an airport carrying a heavy laptop in a bag, an iPod in one pocket for music, a digital camera for family photos, and a BlackBerry clipped to their belt strictly for work. Force 4 smartphone displacement dictates that convenience always wins. The smartphone was not just a phone, it was a vacuum that absorbed entire categories of single-purpose hardware into one sleek piece of glass and aluminum. The small crack in the BlackBerry fortress became a structural failure through a cultural shift known as BYOD, bring your own device. It started at the very top of the corporate hierarchy. An American CEO or a senior partner at a law firm would purchase an early iPhone at an AT&T store. They would experience the fluidity of the touch screen, the vibrant colors, and the ability to listen to music seamlessly. On Monday morning, they would walk into their office, drop the glass device on the IT administrator's desk, and issue a simple, non-negotiable command: make my corporate email work on this. The IT department would heavily protest. They would explain the strict security protocols of the corporate firewall and the necessity of the BlackBerry server. But a network administrator cannot fire a CEO. The strict, unyielding wall of corporate security bent to the desire for a beautiful consumer experience. Microsoft recognized this vulnerability in the market immediately. They pushed Exchange Active Sync, a communication protocol that allowed iPhones and early Android devices to securely pull corporate email, calendars, and contacts directly from Microsoft servers without ever needing RIM's proprietary middleman software. Almost overnight, the IT department lost its absolute authority over the American pocket. If an employee wanted to buy their own glass smartphone and connect it to the company server, the company now allowed it. The psychological relationship with the BlackBerry completely inverted. For years, being issued a BlackBerry meant you were important. It was a status symbol. By 2009, carrying a BlackBerry meant you were simply an employee on a leash. The heavy plastic corporate device became known as the work phone, a rigid, boring tool mandated by human resources, while the sleek iPhone in the other pocket became the life phone, the personal portal to the real internet. The physical keyboard, once the ultimate symbol of speed and productivity, suddenly felt like a cage. When an American user looked at a BlackBerry, half of the physical device was permanently consumed by plastic keys. Those keys were magnificent for typing emails, but they were entirely useless when trying to view a full desktop website, watch a streaming video, or navigate a digital map. The BlackBerry browser, a slow, text-heavy piece of software designed to sip tiny amounts of data, felt ancient compared to the iPhone's Safari browser, which rendered the actual New York Times homepage exactly as it appeared on a desktop computer. America did not just want to send text messages anymore. It wanted to consume the entire web, and a permanent plastic keyboard was standing in the way of the screen. The keys were no longer a feature. They were a physical boundary. Research in Motion watched their impenetrable corporate wall crumble from the inside. They realized they had to fight a new war, not in the server room, but in the brightly lit aisles of the American Carrier store, competing directly for the consumer's attention. And in a state of absolute panic, they engineered a response that would break the trust of the American public forever. The panic inside Research in Motion culminated in the holiday shopping season of 2008, with the release of a device that permanently shattered the company's reputation for flawless engineering. Verizon, the largest American telecom carrier at the time, was desperate. AT&T held the exclusive American rights to sell the iPhone, and Verizon needed a high-profile touchscreen device to compete on their retail shelves. They pressured RIM, and RIM rushed out the BlackBerry Storm. The Storm removed the iconic physical keyboard entirely, replacing it with a heavy glass touchscreen mounted on a mechanical suspension system called SurePress. The entire screen was essentially one giant physical button. The user had to push the glass down until it physically clicked to register a keystroke. It was an engineering nightmare. In American living rooms, users who brought the Storm home found the software severely lagging behind their physical typing. The device froze constantly. The mechanical screen was exhausting to press. Return rates at Verizon retail stores hit historic, catastrophic levels. For a brand built entirely on the promise of absolute reliability and tactile precision, the Storm was a fatal betrayal of American consumer trust. This failure triggered the collapse of Force 2, retail and distribution. The American Carrier store, the brightly lit retail shops operated by AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon, was the physical bottleneck of the mobile industry. If the sales clerks on the floor did not recommend your device, you did not exist. After the Storm disaster, Verizon executives lost faith in RIM's ability to fight Apple. They pivoted their massive marketing budget toward a new operating system, the core software that manages a device and lets other programs run. They threw their weight behind Google's Android, launching the Motorola Droid in late 2009. Almost overnight, the physical footprint of BlackBerry devices in American Carrier stores began to shrink. The premium display tables near the front doors were handed over to Apple and Android devices. The BlackBerry was pushed to the back wall, marketed mostly to holdouts and stubborn corporate lifers. Simultaneously, BlackBerry was being crushed by Force 3 network effects and developer ecosystems. In 2008, Apple introduced the App Store, a controlled, centralized digital marketplace where users could find, purchase, and install third-party software. The smartphone was no longer just a browser and an email machine. It became an interactive map, a guitar tuner, a banking portal, a restaurant guide, and a mobile video game console. Developers in startup offices across Silicon Valley and New York immediately flocked to iOS and Android. Those platforms offered modern, intuitive tools for writing software. RIM's operating system, however, was an aging, convoluted legacy system, an older technology structure still in use long after the market had moved on. It was originally built to route text securely, not to render high-definition graphics or run complex mobile applications. When an American user opened BlackBerry App World, the shelves were practically empty. They saw their friends on iPhones playing Angry Birds, posting photos to Instagram, and requesting rides on Uber. The BlackBerry user had none of these. The trap of the ecosystem snapped shut. Developers refused to build apps for BlackBerry because the consumers were leaving, and the consumers left because the device had no apps. By 2011, there was only one thing keeping the remaining American user base from abandoning the platform entirely: BlackBerry Messenger. BBM was the final, desperate anchor. Teenagers, college students, and professionals still clung to their physical keyboards because leaving the device meant being exiled from the exclusive social network of BBMPINs, the blue chat bubbles, and the instant gratification of the red receipt. BBM was arguably the most valuable mobile messaging network in the world. But RIM made a fatal, hubristic calculation. They believed that if they kept BBM strictly locked to BlackBerry hardware, users would be forced to keep buying their phones. They refused to release BBM as a standalone app for the iPhone or Android. The American market did not wait. A startup called WhatsApp launched, offering the exact same fast data-based messaging and read receipts as BBM, but it worked across every type of smartphone. Later that same year, Apple introduced iMessage, seamlessly integrating read receipts and exclusive blue text bubbles directly into the iPhone's native texting app. The walled garden was breached. The final excuse to tolerate a tiny screen, an outdated browser, and an empty app store evaporated. Once an American user realized they could chat with their friends on a massive sheet of glass just as easily as they could on a plastic keyboard, the migration became a stampede. When RIM finally attempted to launch a modern, touch-first operating system called BlackBerry 10 in 2013, the war was already over. The American IT departments had fully surrendered to the bring-your-own-device movement. The corporate walls had fallen. The escalation staircase was complete. The carrier shelf changed. The IT wall fell. The developers moved to the glass. The App Store remained empty. The social network quieted. The physical keys remained. The user habit was gone. After the disastrous failure of BlackBerry 10, the company officially surrendered the operating system war. They realized that an American market addicted to the endless novelty of the App Store would never return to a closed, utilitarian ecosystem. The BlackBerry name survived briefly through licensing agreements, most notably with the Chinese manufacturing giant TCL. They produced devices like the BlackBerry Key 1 and Key 2, Android smartphones, that attempted a desperate compromise, slapping a physical keyboard onto the bottom of a touchscreen display. But a keyboard attached to an infinite scrolling machine completely missed the point of the original hardware. The brand was irrevocably diluted. By 2020, even those licensing deals expired. On January 4, 2022, Research in Motion, now simply renamed BlackBerry Limited and pivoted to enterprise cybersecurity software, officially turned off the servers that powered the original operating system. Yet, long after the network went dark, a quiet but intensely loyal preservation community remained active across the United States. On internet message boards like Crackberry and deep inside Reddit forums, thousands of American users refuse to let the physical keys go. They trade technical advice on how to bypass network activation errors, how to replace aging batteries in the BlackBerry Bold, and which obscure mobile carriers still support the fading 2G and 3G network bands required to keep the devices breathing. In museums like the Computer History Museum in Silicon Valley, early BlackBerry pagers are displayed behind glass, recognized as the crucial missing link between the desktop computer and the modern smartphone. On eBay and in thrift stores, dead stock boxes of early models are hunted by collectors not as cheap, discarded electronics, but as vital artifacts of a lost digital era. Some enthusiasts have even repurposed their old phones as offline digital typewriters, using the tactile keys solely for drafting documents without the distraction of an internet connection. This stubborn loyalty was not limited to internet hobbyists and vintage tech collectors. The highest levels of the American government fiercely resisted the transition to glass. The surprise footnote to the BlackBerry collapse is that while the everyday American consumer abandoned the device by 2010, the American political and military establishment clung to it for years. When Barack Obama entered the Oval Office in 2009, he famously fought the Secret Service and the IT administrators to keep his BlackBerry, arguing it was his only unfiltered connection to the outside world. The National Security Agency had to build a heavily modified, heavily encrypted version just for the president because they fundamentally did not trust the security architecture of early iPhones and Android devices. The device that began as a corporate pager ended its hardware life as the last trusted pocket computer of the American presidency. The desire to hold on to these heavy plastic rectangles passes the test of true historical significance. This is not merely nostalgia for the early 2000s. The survival of the BlackBerry in American cultural memory represents a profound philosophical argument about what mobile technology was originally supposed to be. Today, an old BlackBerry classic, sitting on a desk, is physical proof of a time when a pocket computer was engineered as a finite tool, rather than an infinite destination. The physical keyboard was a strict boundary. You picked the device up with a specific intention: to read a message, to write a reply, and to put it back down. The interface was utilitarian, text-heavy, and visually boring by design. It did not offer an endless feed of algorithmic videos. It did not push notifications from 3 different social networks simultaneously. Ironically, the blinking red LED light, the feature that originally sparked the crackberry addiction and blurred the line between the American home and the office, now seems incredibly tame compared to the constant, vibrating anxiety of modern smartwatch alerts and locked screen notifications. The modern glass smartphone, the device that replaced the BlackBerry in every American pocket, is not just a tool, it is an attention casino. The frictionless sheet of glass is deliberately designed to remove all physical barriers between the user and the software ecosystem, encouraging an endless loop of scrolling, swiping, and consumption. America traded the tactile friction of a plastic keyboard for the infinite convenience of the touchscreen, and in doing so, it permanently traded its attention span. America did not stop wanting to be connected. It simply decided that the cost of carrying a dedicated, secure communication device was no longer worth missing out on the colorful, chaotic, app-driven culture of the modern web. The IT department lost its power to dictate the tools of the American worker, handing that authority over to the brightly lit carrier stores and the global app developers. The exclusive walled garden of the BBM pin was torn down, replaced by a dozen different messaging apps that track every metric of our digital lives. The era of the single-purpose professional device was permanently absorbed into the era of the universal distraction machine. Somewhere in an American desk drawer, a BlackBerry still sits with a worn keyboard and a dead battery, the screen dark, the red notification light silent, waiting for a network that no longer answers. See you in the next one.